Coming home from a business trip, I heard frantic pounding from our basement. I broke the padlock and found my husband, filthy, dehydrated, confused. He'd been locked there for 3 days. When I asked who did this, he said, "Your daughter and her new boyfriend. She said she was going to..." The next words shocked me to my core. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me back up and tell you how this nightmare began. I'm Margaret Sullivan, 54, and I thought I had the perfect family. My daughter Chloe, 28, had always been my pride and joy. Smart, beautiful, successful in her marketing career. My husband David, 56, owned a small but profitable construction company. We lived in a nice colonial house in suburbia, the kind of place where neighbors still waved and kids rode bikes safely. 3 months ago, everything started changing when Chloe brought home Derek, her new boyfriend, 25 years old, covered in tattoos, with those dead eyes that made my skin crawl. But Chloe was smitten, absolutely head over heels for this guy who had no job, no car, and apparently no shame about mooching off my daughter. "Mom, you just don't understand him," she'd say whenever I expressed concern. "Derek's been through a lot. He needs someone who believes in him." What Derek needed, I thought privately, was a job and a reality check. But I bit my tongue because arguing with Chloe when she was in love was like trying to reason with a tornado. The first red flag came when David mentioned finding Derek in his office, rifling through papers. "He said he was looking for a pen," David told me, frowning. "But my desk drawers were all open, and some of my business files looked disturbed." I should have trusted my husband's instincts. David was many things, but paranoid wasn't one of them. If he thought something was off, something was definitely off. The second red flag was when our neighbors, the Petersons, told me they'd seen Derek walking around our house at odd hours, even when Chloe's car wasn't in the driveway. "We thought maybe he was house-sitting," Mrs. Peterson had said, "but it seemed strange, him being out there at midnight, looking in windows." But the biggest red flag was how Chloe had started treating her father and me. Suddenly, we were obstacles. Suddenly, every family dinner became a battlefield where Derek sat silently while Chloe defended his every flaw and attacked our every concern. "You guys just can't stand seeing me happy," she'd snap. "Derek makes me feel alive in ways you'll never understand." The last normal conversation I had with my daughter was 2 weeks before my business trip. I was leaving for a week-long conference in Seattle, and I asked if she and Derek wanted to house-sit, keep David company. The look that flashed between them should have been another warning, but I was too focused on my upcoming presentation to read the signs. "Actually, Mom," Chloe had said, her voice strangely excited, "Derek and I were thinking this might be the perfect time to surprise Dad with that basement renovation he's always wanted." David had mentioned wanting to finish the basement for years, turn it into a proper workshop. It seemed like such a thoughtful gesture from Chloe, a peace offering after weeks of tension. I should have known my daughter better. Chloe had never shown interest in construction projects or pleasing her father through manual labor. But I was so relieved they wanted to do something nice for David that I didn't ask the obvious questions. Like why Derek, who couldn't hold down a minimum wage job, was suddenly enthusiastic about home improvement. Or why Chloe, who once called a handyman to change a light bulb, was ready to tackle basement renovations. Instead, I kissed them goodbye, told David to enjoy his surprise, and flew off to Seattle, completely oblivious to the trap my own daughter was setting. The conference was a success. I gave my presentation on innovative marketing strategies to a packed auditorium, fielded questions from industry leaders, and even got approached about a potential job offer in New York. For one glorious week, I felt like more than just a suburban mom with a successful career. I felt powerful, respected, unstoppable. I tried calling David several times during the week, but the calls went straight to voicemail. I assumed he was busy with work or the basement project. I left cheerful messages about my presentation, about the beautiful Seattle weather, about how much I missed him and couldn't wait to see what he and Chloe had accomplished. Looking back, the silence should have terrified me. David always answered my calls, always. In 22 years of marriage, I could count on one hand the number of times he'd missed my calls, and each time had a very good reason. This should have been reason 5. The flight home was delayed, turning my planned afternoon arrival into a red-eye return. I dragged my luggage through the front door at 2:47 a.m., exhausted but happy to be home. The house was dark, which seemed normal given the hour. I climbed the stairs quietly, not wanting to wake David. Our bedroom was empty. The bed was made, but it looked like it hadn't been slept in. David's side was perfectly smooth, his pillow undisturbed. My first thought was that he'd fallen asleep in his workshop, probably surrounded by the basement renovation supply. I was actually smiling as I walked back downstairs, imagining finding him passed out in a chair, surrounded by scattered tools and building plans. I'd wake him gently, hear all about the progress they'd made, maybe even see the surprise they'd been working on all week. That's when I heard it, faint but desperate. Pounding, coming from below. The basement door was locked, locked with a heavy-duty padlock I'd never seen before. The pounding was coming from directly beneath my feet, weak but persistent, like someone using their last reserves of strength. My heart started racing as a terrible understanding crept over me. I grabbed a hammer from the kitchen junk drawer and smashed that padlock with a fury I didn't know I possessed. What I found in that basement will haunt me for the rest of my life. David was chained to a support beam, wearing the same clothes I'd kissed him goodbye a week ago. His face was gaunt, his lips cracked, his eyes wild with desperation. A bucket in the corner told me everything I needed to know about the conditions he'd been kept in. "Oh God, David!" I rushed to him, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock the chains. "What happened? Who did this to you?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Your daughter and that boyfriend of hers. They were going to what?" I demanded, finally freeing one of his wrists. That's when David said the words that changed everything. "They were going to bury me alive tomorrow morning. Make it look like I had a heart attack while working in the basement." Chloe said, "She said you'd never have to know what really happened." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "That's impossible. Chloe would never—" "Margaret, listen to me." David grabbed my hands with what little strength he had left. "They've been planning this for months. Derek's done this before. Your daughter, our daughter, she wants us dead. Both of us." The words hit me like ice water. "Both of us. The life insurance policies, the house, everything. But they needed you away first, needed to establish alibis. Margaret, you're supposed to die in a car accident tomorrow night when you come home from your trip." My legs gave out. I sank onto the concrete floor, staring at my husband in disbelief. This had to be some kind of breakdown, some trauma-induced paranoia. Chloe might be difficult lately, but murder? My daughter was a marketing executive, not a killer. But as I looked around the basement, really looked, I saw things that made my blood freeze. A freshly dug section of floor, maybe 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. Bags of quicklime stacked in the corner. Heavy-duty tarps folded neatly on a workbench that definitely hadn't been there before my trip. "They were going to bury you here," I whispered. David nodded weakly. "Derek bragged about it. Said he'd done this twice before, in other states. Said it was easier than you'd think to make someone disappear when their family was in on it." I helped David upstairs, my mind racing. Where were Chloe and Derek now? Did they know I was home early? How long did we have before they came back to finish what they started? As if reading my thoughts, David grabbed my arm. "They're not expecting you until tomorrow evening. That gives us maybe 18 hours to figure out what to do." "What to do?" I stared at him. "We call the police. We tell them everything." David's laugh was bitter. "With what evidence? My word against our daughters?" "Derek's already thought of that. He showed me newspaper clippings about those other murders, Margaret. In both cases, the families claimed the missing person had mental health issues, memory problems. The police never investigated too deeply when grieving families provided such detailed explanation. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The basement renovation store. It gives them a perfect reason for you to be down there. And when they find my body tomorrow, Chloe will tell everyone I'd been acting strange lately, forgetting things, getting confused. She'll say I must have had a medical episode while working and hit my head. The chains, the padlock, all of it will be gone. Just a tragic accident in what was supposed to be my new workshop. I walked to the kitchen window, peering out at our quiet suburban street. Everything looked so normal. The Petersons' porch light was on, just like always. The newspaper delivery truck was starting its early morning round. How could such evil be lurking in a place where children still drew hopscotch squares on sidewalk? "Where are they now?" I asked. "Derek has an apartment across town. Chloe's been staying there all week, establishing their alibi. They check on me every few hours, just to make sure I'm still alive, but not comfortable." David's voice hardened. "Your daughter seems to enjoy watching me suffer." The woman he described couldn't be my Chloe, not the little girl who used to make me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day, or the teenager who cried when she accidentally stepped on a butterfly. But then I remembered the changes I'd seen in her lately, the coldness, the way she looked at David and me like we were obstacles instead of parents. "We need proof," I said finally, "something that will make the police listen." David struggled to his feet, still weak but determined. "There might be something. Derek keeps a notebook, writes everything down like it's some kind of business plan. He was showing it to Chloe yesterday, bragging about how organized he was." "Where?" "His apartment." "But Margaret, we can't just walk in there. If they catch us." I looked at my husband, this good man who'd been tortured by our own daughter, and felt something cold and deadly settle in my chest. For 28 years I'd been Chloe's protector, her biggest supporter, her safe harbor in every storm. Now I was going to destroy her. "Then we'll have to make sure they don't catch us," I said quietly, "because one way or another, I'm going to see that notebook." David's recovery was slower than I'd hoped. Even after a shower, food, and rest, he moved like an old man instead of the vibrant 56-year-old I'd married. Every time he winced climbing stairs or struggled to lift his coffee cup, my rage toward Chloe and Derek burned hotter. By noon, we had a plan. David would stay home, call in sick to work, and maintain the appearance that he was fine. I would go to Derek's apartment complex complex under the guise of surprising Chloe with an early return from my trip. But Margaret, David warned, if that notebook proves what I think it does, we're not just dealing with one planned murder. We're dealing with serial killers. I stared at my reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting my business blazer. The woman looking back at me looked professional, trustworthy, maternal. No one would suspect her of planning a break-in. Then it's time someone stopped them. Derek lived in Riverside Apartments, one of those complexes where people minded their own business and management asked minimal questions. Perfect for someone with secrets to hide. I parked across the street and watched the building for 30 minutes, noting the security cameras, the entrance patterns, the general flow of residents. At 2:15 p.m., I saw my opening. An elderly woman struggled with grocery bags at the main entrance. I hurried over to help her, following her inside with a warm smile and casual conversation about the beautiful weather. "Are you visiting someone, dear?" she asked as we waited for the elevator. "My daughter," I lied smoothly. "She's been under the weather, so I thought I'd bring her some soup." The woman's face lit up. How thoughtful. I hope she feels better soon. Derek's apartment was 3B. I waited until the hallway was empty, then knocked softly. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder, calling out in my most concerned mother voice. "Chloe? Honey? It's Mom. I got home early from Seattle and wanted to check on you." Still nothing. I tried the door handle, not really expecting it to work. It turned. Derek apparently felt so secure in his criminal genius that he'd left his apartment unlocked, or maybe he was just that arrogant. Either way, I slipped inside and quickly locked the door behind me. The apartment was smaller than I'd expected, with the kind of sparse, temporary feel that suggested someone ready to disappear at a moment's notice. But what caught my attention immediately were the stacks of notebooks on the coffee table. 3 spiral-bound notebooks, each labeled with a different name and date. Patricia Chen, 2019. Robert Martinez, 2021. David Sullivan, 2023. My hands shook as I opened David's notebook. Page after page of meticulously detailed plan. Chloe's work schedule. David's daily routines. The best times to access our house undetected. Floor plans of our basement. Even sketches of where they planned to bury his body. But it was the earlier notebooks that made my blood run cold. Patricia Chen, a 62-year-old widow in Phoenix, whose stepdaughter had reported her missing in 2019. Robert Martinez, a divorced father of 2 in Denver, whose son claimed he'd run off with a woman he met online. Derek had kept everything. Photos of the victims before they died, detailed timelines of the murders, even newspaper clippings about the investigation. It was like a serial killer's trophy collection, except Derek wasn't working alone. Each notebook contained photos of different young women, different partners, different daughters and stepchildren who'd helped Derek murder their own parent. I grabbed my phone and started photographing pages as fast as I could. Names, dates, locations, methods, everything that could help police connect these cases and stop Derek from finding his next partner. That's when I heard voices in the hallway, familiar voices. "I still think we should have waited until tonight," Chloe was saying. "What if she comes home early?" "Relax, baby." Derek's voice was amused, confident. "Your mom's flight doesn't land until 6 p.m. And even if she comes straight home, that gives us plenty of time to clean up the mess." The mess. They were talking about David like he was garbage to be disposed of. I quickly closed the notebook, replacing them exactly as I'd found them, and looked around frantically for somewhere to hide. The apartment was too small, too open. The bedroom? Too obvious. The bathroom? They might need to use it. The closet? It was small but deep, filled with clothes that smelled like cigarettes and cologne. I squeezed myself between Derek's leather jackets and held my breath as the key turned in the lock. "So what's the timeline?" Chloe asked as they entered. "Simple. We go to your house at 3, take care of your dad, clean up the basement. Tonight when your mom gets home, she finds his body and has a tragic accident on her way to call for help. And then?" Derek's laugh made my skin crawl. "Then we wait for the insurance money and plan our next move. I'm thinking somewhere warm this time. Florida maybe. Lots of lonely widows in Florida." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making any sound. They were already planning their next victim, their next daughter, to seduce and manipulate into murder. "I can't believe I'm actually doing this," Chloe said, her voice smaller now. "Having second thoughts?" Derek's tone turned cold. No, of course not. It's just, he's my dad, you know? Your dad who never believed in you. Your dad who treats you like a child. Your dad who's standing between you and the life you deserve." I wanted to scream. David adored Chloe. He'd worked overtime for years to pay for her college, celebrated every promotion, bragged about her accomplishments to anyone who'd listen. How had Derek twisted that love into something ugly? "You're right, Chloe said finally. He never really saw me as an adult, and Mom's even worse, always trying to protect me from making my own decision. After today, baby, you'll never have to worry about anyone controlling your life again. They were quiet for a moment, and I heard rustling sounds. Maybe Derek gathering supplies from somewhere in the apartment. What about the other families? Chloe asked suddenly. The ones in your notebooks. Did they ever figure out what really happened? Patricia's stepdaughter moved to California with her inheritance. Never looked back. Roberto's son bought a house in Vegas. Also never looked back. Families are funny, Chloe. When someone dies and leaves money behind, people aren't as eager to ask uncomfortable questions as you might think. And if they did ask questions, then they'd have accidents too. The casual way he said it, like discussing the weather, made my blood freeze. How many people had Derek killed? How many families had he destroyed? Okay, Derek said finally. Time to go finish this. You ready? I'm ready. I waited until I was sure they were gone, then slipped out of the closet and immediately called David. They're coming, I whispered urgently. Right now. They're coming to kill you. Get out of the house, I told David as I ran to my car. Go to the police station. Go anywhere. Just get out now. What about the evidence? The notebooks? I was already backing out of the parking space, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I have photos, dozens of them. We have everything we need. But I was wrong. As I raced through suburban streets, running red lights and praying no cops would stop me, I realized we had photographs of notebooks that could disappear at any moment. We had David's testimony about being imprisoned, but no physical evidence of the chains or padlock. We had my word that I'd seen burial preparations in our basement, but those could be cleaned up in minutes. What we didn't have was proof that would hold up in court against a sweet-faced marketing executive who would claim her traumatized father was having delusions after a medical episode. I called Detective Sarah Morrison, a family friend who'd gone to high school with me. Sarah, I need you to meet me at my house right now. It's a matter of life and death. Margaret, what's wrong? My daughter is trying to murder her father and me. I have evidence, but you need to see it now before they destroy it. There was a pause. Margaret, are you feeling all right? Maybe you should come to the station and we can... Sarah, please. I know how this sounds, but I'm begging you. Just meet me at my house. If I'm wrong, if I'm crazy, then arrest me for filing a false report. But if I'm right and you don't come, David will be dead by tonight. Something in my voice must have convinced her. I'm 10 minutes away. I pulled into my driveway just as Derek's beat-up Honda was pulling out. Through the windshield, I could see Chloe in the passenger seat, her face pale but determined. When she saw me, her eyes went wide with panic. Derek hit the gas, squealing out of the neighborhood, but I'd seen enough. They were running, which meant they'd probably finished whatever they'd come to do. I found David in our kitchen, very much alive but holding a bloody kitchen towel to his forearm. What happened? They came to finish the job, he said grimly, but I was ready for them. When Derek came at me with a syringe, I fought back, managed to cut my arm on broken glass, but I got the syringe away from him. He handed me a plastic bag containing a syringe filled with clear liquid. Evidence. Detective Morrison arrived just as David was explaining how Chloe had stood watch, while Derek tried to inject him with what they claimed was a quick and peaceful way to die. They panicked when I fought back, David continued. Started arguing about whether to just beat me to death and make it look like a home invasion. That's when Chloe saw you pulling in and they ran. Sarah listened to our story with the practiced skepticism of a 20-year police veteran. But when I showed her the photographs from Derek's notebooks, her expression changed completely. These other victims, she said, studying the images. Patricia Chen was one of our cold cases. We never found enough evidence to prove what happened to her. Because her stepdaughter was helping with the cover-up, I explained. Derek has a system. He finds young women with wealthy parents, seduces them, convinces them that murder is the only way to get what they deserve. And you think your daughter... I know my daughter is planning to kill us both for the insurance money. The question is, are you going to help us stop her? Sarah made several phone calls, dispatching units to Derek's apartment and putting out a bolo alert for Chloe and Derek. But I knew they were long gone. Derek was too experienced to stick around after a failed murder attempt. What's the life insurance situation? Sarah asked. David and I exchanged glances. $2 million each, I admitted. We updated our policies last year when David's business expanded. And Chloe is the sole beneficiary? We thought we were being responsible parents, making sure she'd be taken care of if anything happened to us. Sarah shook her head. Instead, you painted targets on your backs. While Sarah coordinated with other detectives, I found myself staring at the basement door. I need to show you something else. The basement was exactly as I'd left it after freeing David. The fresh grave, the lime, the tarps, everything Derek needed for a quick burial and body disposal. Jesus, Sarah breathed. They really were planning to bury him alive. The question is, what happens now? I asked. They know we're on to them. They know we have evidence. What's to stop them from disappearing and finding new victims? Sarah's radio crackled with an update from the unit searching Derek's apartment. Detective Morrison, apartment is empty. Looks like they cleared out in a hurry, but we found something interesting. What? More notebooks. Looks like they had plans for at least 6 more potential victims, all young women with wealthy parents. This guy's been running a murder recruitment service. I felt sick. How many other daughters had Derek poisoned against their parents? How many other families were in danger right now? There's something else, the officer continued. We found airline tickets, 2 one-way flights to Mexico City, departing tonight at 11:47 p.m. Sarah looked at her watch. It's 4:30 now. If we move fast, we can catch them at the airport. But I had a better idea, a more permanent solution to the Derek problem. Sarah, what if they never made it to the airport? She looked at me sharply. Margaret, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking that Derek has killed at least 3 people, maybe more. I'm thinking he's turned my daughter into an accomplice to attempted murder. And I'm thinking the justice system has a funny way of letting people like Derek slip through the cracks. You're talking about vigilante justice. I'm talking about protecting other families from what he did to mine. David put his hand on my shoulder. Margaret, I know you're angry. I'm angry too, but we have to do this the right way. The right way. The way that would put Derek in prison for maybe 10 years while my daughter served even less time for being a manipulated accomplice. The way that would let Derek eventually get out and find new victims. The way that prioritized legal procedures over justice. You're right, I told David, though I was already forming a different plan. We should definitely do this the right way. But as Sarah coordinated the airport stakeout and David gave his official statement, I was thinking about those airline tickets, about how easy it would be to intercept 2 desperate fugitives before they reached Mexico. Some things were too important to leave to the justice system. Sarah's airport stakeout was a bust. Chloe and Derek never showed for their flight, which meant they either had backup travel plans or were hiding somewhere local until the heat died down. Smart money says they're long gone, Sarah told me over coffee the next morning. Derek's done this before. He knows how to disappear. But I wasn't convinced Derek was gone. He'd invested too much time and effort in Chloe to just abandon her. More importantly, he'd left behind his precious notebook, his trophies. Men like Derek didn't abandon their trophies without a fight. What if he's not running? I suggested. What if he's regrouping? Regrouping for what? Think about it. He spent months planning our deaths. $2 million in life insurance, a house worth $400,000, David's business asset. That's not the kind of score someone like Derek walks away from easily. Sarah frowned. You think he'll try again? I think Derek's ego won't let him accept defeat, and I think my daughter is in way more danger than she realizes. Over the next 3 days, I played the role of grateful survivor. I gave interviews to local news stations about the importance of trusting your instincts when family members start acting strangely. I thanked the police department publicly for their quick response. I hugged David in front of cameras and talked about how fortunate we were to still be alive. But privately, I was hunting. Derek had made one crucial mistake in his rush to escape our house. He'd dropped his cell phone while fighting with David, and it had slid under our kitchen island. Sarah's team had bagged it as evidence, but not before I'd memorized his contact list. 12 names, all women between 22 and 30, all with names like Ashley, Madison, Brittany, all potential accomplices or future victims. I started with Ashley Chen, Patricia Chen's stepdaughter from Phoenix. According to Derek's notebooks, Ashley had helped him murder her stepmother in 2019. If Derek was following his usual pattern, he'd maintain contact with his successful accomplices. Ashley answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? Ashley, this is Margaret Sullivan. I think we need to talk. There was a long pause. I don't know anyone by that name. Sure you do. I'm David Sullivan's wife, the man your boyfriend Derek tried to murder 3 days ago. The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said you were dead. Well, I'm not. And unless you want to join Derek in federal prison, I suggest we meet. 2 hours later, I sat across from Ashley Chen in a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix. She was everything I'd expected Derek to be attracted to. Young, beautiful, and carrying the kind of emotional damage that made her vulnerable to manipulation. He told me you and your husband died in a car accident, she said, her hands shaking as she lifted her cup. He said Chloe was devastated but handling it well. Derek lies, Ashley, about everything, just like he lied to you about your stepmother. Her face crumpled. Patricia was never mean to me. She tried so hard to be a good stepmother after Dad died. But Derek, he made me see her differently, made me think she was trying to steal my inheritance. Where is he now? I don't know. He called 2 days ago asking for money, said he and Chloe were in trouble and needed to disappear for a while. I told him I couldn't help him anymore. Smart girl. But Ashley, I need you to understand something. Derek will be back. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but eventually he'll need something from you. And when that happens, you need to call me immediately. I handed her my card with both my cell phone and the direct line to Detective Morrison. He'll kill me if he finds out I talked to you. He'll kill you anyway. Eventually. Men like Derek don't leave loose ends. The drive back from Phoenix gave me time to think. Derek was wounded, running low on resources, and probably furious at being outmaneuvered. That made him desperate, which made him dangerous in unpredictable ways. But it also also made him sloppy. When I got home, David was waiting with news. Detective Morrison called. They tracked Derek's credit cards to a hotel in Tucson. She's coordinating with local police for an arrest. Finally. What about Chloe? She's with him. Sarah says they'll both be in custody by tonight. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness. 3 days of planning revenge, and it was ending with a simple hotel arrest. Derek would hire lawyers, claim Chloe was an unwilling victim, probably get a reduced sentence in exchange for information about his other victims. But sometimes, the universe provides its own justice. The call came at 11:30 that night. Detective Morrison, her voice tired but satisfied. We got them. Derek's in custody, no bail. Chloe's cooperating, claiming Derek manipulated her into everything. And do you believe her? I believe she's scared and looking for a way out. Whether she was a willing participant or a victim herself, that's for a jury to decide. I hung up and stared out our bedroom window. Tomorrow, I'd visit Chloe in jail. I'd look into my daughter's eyes and try to understand how Derek had turned her into a potential killer. I'd probably end up feeling sorry for her, maybe even fighting for leniency. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel satisfied. Derek was caught. His notebooks would help authorities solve cold cases across multiple states. Other families would finally get answers about their missing loved ones. Is it over? David asked softly. It's over, except it wasn't. Because 3 weeks later, while Derek sat in county jail awaiting trial, Ashley Chen's body was found in her Phoenix apartment, single gunshot to the head, execution style. And according to the medical examiner, she'd been dead for at least 5 days, which meant Derek had killed her before I'd ever met with her in that coffee shop, which meant someone else had been impersonating Ashley during our conversation. Someone who now knew exactly who I was and how much I'd learned about Derek's operation. The realization that I'd been talking to an imposter hit me like ice water. If Ashley Chen had been dead for days before our meeting, then whoever I'd met in Phoenix was part of Derek's network. Someone who knew about the murders, the notebooks, the whole operation. Someone who was still free. I called Detective Morrison immediately. Sarah, we have a problem. Margaret, it's 2 a.m. What's Ashley Chen is dead. Has been for days. Which means the woman I met with wasn't Ashley. The silence on the other end told me Sarah was processing the implications as quickly as I was. Are you sure? Phoenix PD found her body in her apartment. Medical examiner says she died last Tuesday. I met with Ashley on Friday. Jesus, that means Derek's organization is bigger than we thought, and they know I'm investigating them. Within an hour, Sarah was at our house with 2 other detectives and a security specialist. Our phones were being monitored, our house was under surveillance, and David and I were officially under police protection. The woman you met with, Detective Rodriguez asked, reviewing my statement for the 3rd time. Describe her again. Mid-20s brunette, about 5'6", nervous, kept checking her phone. Said she lived in Phoenix, but her accent sounded more East Coast. Any distinguishing features? I closed my eyes, trying to remember detail. A small scar on her left hand, between her thumb and index finger, and she wore a silver bracelet with what looked like initial. Did you see what the initials were? MS, I think, or maybe MR. Sarah and Rodriguez exchanged glances. Margaret, we need you to look at some photos. They spread out pictures of young women, all roughly the same age and build as the fake Ashley. But one face made my blood freeze. That's her. That's the woman I met with. Her name is Miranda Torres, Rodriguez said grimly. She's Derek's actual partner, not one of his victims, his equal. They've been working together for at least 5 years. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Derek wasn't just a serial killer who seduced vulnerable daughters. He was part of a team. Miranda would scout potential victims, while Derek handled the actual recruitment and murder. How many families have they destroyed? I asked. We're still connecting the dots, but we think at least 15 families across 7 states. 15 families. That meant Miranda Torres was potentially more dangerous than Derek, because she was the one who never got her hands dirty directly. She was the one who could disappear completely while Derek took the fall. Where is she now? Unknown. But Margaret, you've created a problem for their operation. You're the first intended victim who survived and gathered evidence. Miranda will want to eliminate that threat. So what do? We wait. We monitor communications, we follow every lead, and we keep you safe until we can track her down. Waiting wasn't in my nature. Over the next week, while David went back to work under police protection and I tried to maintain some semblance of normal life, I was actually planning. Miranda Torres had made a crucial mistake in meeting with me. She'd revealed that Derek's organization was still active, still hunting, but more importantly, she'd shown me that they were worried enough about my evidence to risk direct contact. That meant they needed something from me, and people who need something can be manipulated. I started with Derek's contact list, the one from his dropped phone. If Miranda was his partner, she'd be communicating with the same network of accomplices and potential victims. I began calling every number, posing as a social worker following up on family welfare cases. Most calls went nowhere. Wrong numbers, disconnected disconnected lines, people who had no idea what I was talking about, but 3 calls got interesting responses. "I already told the other lady I don't need any services," said a young woman in Denver. "The one who called last week asking about my stepfather." "Other lady?" "Yeah, she said she was from some kind of victim support group for people dealing with difficult family relationship, but something about her seemed off." Miranda was still hunting, still looking for vulnerable daughters with wealthy parents. The second interesting call was to a number registered to someone named Jennifer Walsh in Miami. But when I called, the woman who answered had a distinctly different accent than what I'd expect from someone living in Florida. "Jennifer's not available," the woman said quickly. "Can I take a message? This is about the family consultation services. Jennifer expressed interest in our program for adult children dealing with inheritance conflict." "Oh, yes, she's very interested. When can someone meet with her?" I scheduled a meeting for the following week, knowing I'd found another member of Miranda's network. But the third call was the jackpot. The number was registered to a Michael Santos in Las Vegas. When I called, Miranda Torres answered the phone. "Hello, this is Margaret Sullivan," I said sweetly. "I believe we met in Phoenix last week to discuss Ashley Chen's situation." The silence lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Miss Sullivan," Miranda said finally, her voice ice cold. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you again." "I'm sure you were. Now let's talk about what you really want." "What I want is for you to stop interfering with things you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You and Derek have been murdering parents for their money. You recruit their own children to help. And now you're worried I'm going to expose your entire operation. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Then why don't you explain it to me? Face to face this time. No more hiding behind dead women's identities." Another long pause. Then, "You want to meet? I want to end this, one way or another, tomorrow, 2 p.m. There's a warehouse district on the east side of town, near the old textile mill. Come alone. And if I don't, then your husband dies. Your neighbors die. Anyone who's helped you dies. This ends tomorrow, Miss Sullivan. The only question is whether it ends with just your death or a lot more." She hung up. I sat staring at my phone, my heart racing. I'd just arranged a meeting with a serial killer who'd already proven she could eliminate anyone she saw as a threat. But I'd also just given her exactly what she wanted, a chance to end the problem permanently. The question was, did she realize I was giving her the opportunity to walk into a trap? I didn't tell David about the meeting. I didn't tell Detective Morrison. I didn't tell anyone, because what I was planning wasn't exactly legal. Miranda Torres had killed at least 15 people and was actively hunting for more victims. The justice system would give her lawyers, appeals, maybe even a plea deal in exchange for testimony about Derek's other crimes. She'd served 20 years, get out in her 40s, and probably start killing again. That wasn't acceptable. At 1:45 p.m. the next day, I parked 3 blocks from the abandoned textile mill and walked to the meeting site. I wore a wire that Detective Morrison didn't know about, one I'd purchased from a private investigator downtown. Whatever happened in that warehouse, there would be a recording. The building was exactly what I'd expected from a serial killer's choice of meeting place. Isolated, crumbling, with multiple exits and plenty of space for disposing of body. Miranda had clearly done this before. I found her waiting in what used to be the main factory floor, surrounded by rusted machinery and broken windows that cast strange shadows in the afternoon light. "Miss Sullivan," she said, not turning around. "Punctual. I like that. Miranda Torres. Or is that even your real name?" She laughed, finally facing me. In person, she was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'4", with the kind of forgettable face that would be perfect for her line of work. "My real name isn't important. What's important is what happens next. What happens next is you tell me about the other victims, all of them, and then you turn yourself in. Or I publish everything I know about your operation, Derek's notebooks, the connection to Ashley Chen's murder, the names of your other accomplices. I've got enough evidence to destroy your entire network." Miranda smiled. "Ms. Sullivan, I think you're confused about who has the power here." She pulled out her phone and showed me a live video feed. David was in our kitchen, making coffee, completely unaware that someone was filming him through our window. "It would be so easy," Miranda continued. "A break-in gone wrong. Your husband fights back, gets killed for his trouble. Very tragic. You're bluffing." "Am I?" She tapped her phone, and I watched David answer his cell. "David, this is Miranda. I'm a friend of your wife's. She's asked me to tell you that she's running late, and you should wait for her in the kitchen." I could see David through the video feed, looking confused but compliant. He hung up and returned to the kitchen, positioning himself directly in the cameraman's line of sight. "One phone call," Miranda said. "That's all it takes. But I'd come prepared for this possibility. Before you make that call, you might want to check the news." Miranda frowned, but pulled up a local news website on her phone. The headline made her face go pale. "Serial Killer Network Exposed. Documents link local murder attempt to cold cases nationwide." I didn't wait for our meeting to release the evidence, I explained. "This morning's newspaper has a full expose about Derek's operation. Your photo is on on the front page as his suspected accomplice. By tonight, every police department in the country will be looking for you. You bitch. Oh, that's not even the best part. I also contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit about the insurance fraud angle. Turns out murdering people for their life insurance policies is a federal crime. Even if you killed David right now, you'd never be able to collect a penny without triggering a federal investigation. Miranda's confident facade was cracking. You think this ends with Derek and me? We're part of something much bigger. I'm counting on it, because every person you give up is another life sentence off your eventual conviction. There won't be a conviction. I'll be long gone before. Where are you going to go, Miranda? Your face is all over the news. Your fingerprints are in the system now. Every border crossing, every airport, every bus station is going to have your photo. She stared at me, probably calculating her remaining option. Run and spend the rest of her life hiding. Or fight, and probably die in a shootout with police. There is a third option, I said quietly, which is, you help me find the other victims. You give me names, locations, evidence, everything you know about the families Derek targeted. In exchange, I'll recommend that prosecutors consider a cooperation agreement. Why would you do that? Because 15 families deserve to know what happened to their loved ones, and because you're more useful to them alive than dead. Miranda was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then she pulled out her phone again. But instead of calling her accomplice watching David, she dialed 911. This is Miranda Torres. I'm wanted in connection with multiple murders across 7 states. I'm ready to surrender, but I'll only talk to FBI agent Sarah Chen, and I want full immunity in exchange for everything I know about the organization. She looked at me while the dispatcher confirmed her location. Agent Chen is Derek's victim, Patricia Chen's niece. She's been hunting us for 4 years. The pieces clicked together one final time. This wasn't just about random serial killers or even organized crime. This was about something much more personal. Derek didn't just kill Patricia Chen, I realized. He killed a federal agent's family. Patricia was FBI, retired, but once FBI, always FBI. Sarah Chen has been tracking Derek's network as a personal mission since 2019. And you just handed yourself over to her. Miranda smiled grimly. Better a federal prison than a shallow grave. Besides, Derek always said the organization was too big to take down. We'll see about that. As police sirens approached the warehouse, I realized I'd been wrong about something crucial. Miranda Torres wasn't just Derek's partner or even a fellow serial killer. She was an undercover federal agent who'd been infiltrating the murder network for years, and I'd just blown her cover. You're FBI? I stared at Miranda in shock as police cars surrounded the warehouse. Agent Miranda Torres, Financial Crimes Unit. I've been undercover for 3.5 years trying to identify the full scope of this murder network. My mind reeled. But you tried to meet with me in Phoenix. You threatened David. I was trying to protect you. When you started digging into Derek's contacts, you put yourself and every other undercover agent in danger. Meeting with you in Phoenix was my way of assessing how much you knew and whether we could trust you. Trust me? You let me think you were a serial killer because I needed to know if you'd go to the media, compromise the investigation, or get yourself killed by trying to play detective. The approaching sirens were getting louder. Miranda quickly pulled out an FBI badge and held it up as the first officers entered the warehouse. Federal agent, she called out. I need to speak with Detective Sarah Morrison immediately. Within minutes, the warehouse was full of local police, FBI agents, and crime scene technicians. I found myself sitting on a loading dock, trying to process what I'd learned. Agent Sarah Chen arrived 40 minutes later. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of intensity that came from personal investment in a case. Ms. Sullivan, she said, sitting beside me. Agent Torres tells me you've been conducting your own investigation. I was trying to save my family. I understand. And you did excellent work. The notebooks you photographed gave us crucial evidence we'd been missing for years. Evidence of what exactly? Agent Chen pulled out a tablet and showed me a complex organizational chart. The murder network isn't just Derek and Miranda. It's at least 30 people across 12 states. They call themselves the Inheritance Club. The chart showed connections between dozens of names, with Derek's photo at the center of one branch and several other photos leading their own branches. Each branch leader, like Derek, recruits and trains accomplices, usually young women with family money issues. They provide them with fake identities, legal documents, and most importantly, targets. Targets? Wealthy parents and step-parents whose children might be vulnerable to manipulation. The organization does extensive research, financial records, family dynamics, psychological profiles. By the time someone like Derek approaches a potential accomplice, they know exactly which emotional buttons to push. I studied the chart more closely. How many people have they killed? We've confirmed 87 murders over the past 8 years, but we think the real number is closer to 150. The magnitude was staggering. And Chloe, your daughter was recruited by Derek approximately 4 months ago. They'd been watching your family since last year, mapping your routines, David's business assets, your insurance policies. agencies. But why Chloe specifically? Agent Chen's expression softened. Your daughter has been struggling financially. Student loans, credit card debt, a salary that doesn't match her lifestyle expectations. The organization specifically targets young adults under financial pressure who have parents with substantial assets. So this was never about love. Derek never cared about Chloe at all. Derek is a sociopath who views human beings as tools. Your daughter was simply the most efficient tool for accessing your family's wealth. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Everything Chloe had said about Derek making her feel alive, about finding someone who understood her, had been carefully calculated manipulation. Where is she now? County jail? Cooperating with our investigation. Ms. Sullivan, your daughter is a victim here too. Derek used sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques to convince her that murdering you and David was not only justified, but necessary for her survival. Will she be prosecuted? That depends on several factors. How much she knew about Derek's other crimes, whether she took any independent actions to harm you or David, her willingness to testify against other members of the organization. Agent Torres approached us, no longer playing the role of cold-blooded killer. Miss Sullivan, I owe you an apology and an explanation. I'm listening. When you contacted Ashley Chen's number, you actually reached me. I'd been using her identity to communicate with other cells in the organization. Your call told me that someone outside law enforcement had connected Derek to Patricia Chen's murder, so you decided to test me. I decided to see if you were trying to help or if you might accidentally compromise years of investigative work. Your meeting with Ashley proved you were smart enough to be useful and motivated enough to be dangerous. Dangerous to whom? To yourself primarily, but also to other families the organization is currently targeting. When you started publishing evidence, you forced them to accelerate their timeline for several planned murders. Agent Chen showed me more photos on her tablet. 3 families in different states were supposed to die over the next 6 months. Thanks to your evidence, we were able to warn them and take the assigned killers into custody. So I helped? You saved at least 6 lives, but you also put Agent Torres's cover at risk and nearly got yourself killed in the process. I looked at Miranda Torres, this woman who terrified me for days. How long will it take to round up the entire network? We arrested 15 people yesterday. With Derek and Miranda's cooperation, we expect to arrest another 20 within the week. The organization's leadership structure is complex, but we've been mapping it for years. And the families who lost loved ones will finally get answers and justice. As the afternoon wore on, I gave detailed statements to multiple agents and detectives. I turned over all the evidence I'd gathered, answered questions about Chloe's behavior patterns, and provided character references for David and myself. But the question that haunted me was what happened next. Derek would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. The organization he'd worked for would be dismantled. Other families would get closure. And Chloe, my daughter who'd been turned into a potential killer by expert psychological manipulation? Ms. Sullivan, Agent Chen said as we wrapped up, there's something else you should know about your daughter. What? The night Derek tried to inject David with that syringe, Chloe called 911. I stared at her. What? The call was disconnected before she could speak to anyone, but we have the recording. She dialed 911 and said, I think someone's going to get hurt, before Derek took the phone away from her. She was trying to stop it? At the last minute, yes, Derek's manipulation was powerful, but it wasn't complete. Some part of your daughter was still trying to save her father. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than rage when I thought about Chloe. Maybe there was hope for rebuilding our relationship after all. Maybe some betrayals could be forgiven, if not forgotten. 3 days later, I sat in a sterile conference room at the county jail, waiting to see Chloe for the first time since she'd tried to help Derek kill us. My hands were steady, but my heart was racing. When they brought her in, I barely recognized my daughter. She'd lost weight. Her face was pale, and her eyes had the hollow look of someone who'd seen too much. But when she saw me, she broke down completely. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wanted to stay angry. Part of me wanted to make her suffer the way David and I had suffered. But looking at this broken young woman, I saw my little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Tell me what happened, Chloe. All of it. Through tears, she told me about Derek's gradual manipulation, how he'd started by listening to her complaints about money, about feeling like David and I didn't respect her independence, how he'd slowly convinced her that we were controlling her life, holding her back from her potential. He said you guys would never let me grow up, never see me as an adult capable of making my own decisions. He made it sound like you were the enemy. And the murder plan? Chloe's voice dropped to a whisper. He said it would look like an accident, that Dad would just go to sleep and not wake up, and you'd have a quick car accident coming home from your trip. He promised no one would suffer. But you knew what you were doing, Chloe. You helped him chain your father in that basement. I know how terrible it sounds. But Derek, he made everything seem so logical. He said Dad would be fine for a few days, that we just needed him out of the way while we set up the accident scene. He said you'd never even know Dad had suffered. And when did you realize it was wrong? Chloe wiped her eyes, leaving mascara streaks on her cheeks. When I saw Dad's face in that basement, when I realized how terrified he was. Derek had told me Dad would be unconscious for most of it, but he was awake and he was begging me to help him. But you didn't help him. I was scared of Derek by then. He'd started getting violent when I questioned anything. He hit me twice that week when I asked if we were sure about the plan. I felt a familiar surge of protective anger. He hit you? That's when I knew I'd made a terrible mistake, but I didn't know how to get out of it. Derek said if I backed out, he'd tell everyone I'd been the one planning everything. He had recordings of me agreeing to the plan, photos of me helping with the basement preparation. So you were trapped until that last night, when Derek actually pulled out that syringe. When I saw him moving toward Dad with it, I couldn't let it happen. I tried to call 911, but Derek heard me and grabbed the phone. Agent Chen told me about the call. You talked to the FBI? I explained about the investigation, about Derek's connection to other murders, about the organization that had been using young people like her to kill their own parents. There were others? Chloe looked horrified. Derek told me we were just solving our specific family problem. Derek told you a lot of things that weren't true. We sat in silence for several minutes. Then Chloe asked the question I'd been dreading. Do you think you can ever forgive me? I don't know, I answered honestly. What you did, what you planned to do, it's going to take time for me to process, for David to process. Is Dad okay? Really okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally, he's struggling. It's hard to trust anyone when your own child has tried to kill you. Fresh tears started down Chloe's face. I've destroyed everything, haven't I? Not everything, but close to it. What happens now? To me, I mean. That depends partly on you. The prosecutor is offering a plea deal if you testify against Derek and provide information about any other organization members you might have met. I'll do it. I'll testify against anyone you want. It also depends on David, whether he's willing to support leniency in exchange for your cooperation. And you? What do you want to happen to me? I studied my daughter's face, looking for signs of the manipulation and coldness I'd seen when she was with Derek. Instead, I saw genuine remorse and terror about her future. I want you to get help, real psychological help, to understand how you let someone convince you to murder your own parents. I want you to take responsibility for your choices, even if Derek influenced them. And eventually, if you're willing to do the work, I want to find a way back to being a family. You'd really give me another chance? You're my daughter. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it also doesn't just disappear. When I left the jail that afternoon, I felt emotionally drained but oddly hopeful. Chloe wasn't the same person Derek had turned her into. The manipulation was real, the psychological damage was real, but so was her remorse. David was waiting for me at home with news. Agent Chen called. Derek pled guilty to all charges in exchange for life in prison instead of the death penalty. He's also providing names and locations for the entire organization. What about Chloe? Manslaughter charges reduced to conspiracy and fraud. If she testifies and completes a psychological rehabilitation program, she could be out in 3 to 5 years. And how do you feel about that? David was quiet for a long time. I feel like our daughter was a victim too. A victim who almost became a killer, but still a victim. If she's willing to get help, if she's willing to take responsibility, maybe we can find our way back. That night, as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset, David asked me something that had been bothering him. Do you think we failed as parents, made Chloe vulnerable to someone like Derek? I think we did the best we could with what we knew at the time. And I think Derek was an expert at finding and exploiting vulnerabilities that every young adult has. But maybe if we'd been more attentive to her financial stress, more supportive of her independence, maybe, or maybe Derek would have found different vulnerabilities to exploit. We can't change what happened, David. We can only decide how we move forward. 2 weeks later, we attended Derek's sentencing. He showed no remorse, no emotion, as the judge sentenced him to life in prison without possibility of parole. But when Chloe took the witness stand to testify about his manipulation technique, I saw something I hadn't expected. I saw my daughter fighting back. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, David and I sat in a family therapy session with Chloe, who was completing her court-mandated psychological rehabilitation. She'd been released on probation the previous month, and this was our first attempt at structured reconciliation. Chloe, the therapist said gently, can you tell your parents what you've learned about Derek's manipulation techniques? My daughter looked older than her 28 years, more serious, but also clearer somehow. Derek used what's called guided radicalization. He started by validating my existing frustration, money stress, feeling like my parents didn't respect my independence. Then he gradually escalated those frustrations into resentments and eventually into justifications for extreme action. And how do you feel about your parents now? Grateful, ashamed, hopeful. Chloe looked directly at David and me. I understand now that everything Derek told me about you guys was designed to isolate me from my support system. You weren't trying to control me. You were trying to protect me, and I almost destroyed that protection forever. David leaned forward. Chloe, I need you to understand something. What happened in that basement, the fear I felt, that's going to take time for me to process. But I also need you to know that I love you, and I want to find a way back to trusting you. I know I have to earn that trust back, maybe for the rest of my life. Maybe, I said, but you're willing to do the work, and that matters. After the session, the three of us went to lunch together. It was awkward, careful, but it was a start. Chloe told us about her new job at a nonprofit, helping other families affected by financial fraud. She'd found purpose in using her experience to prevent others from falling victim to similar manipulation. The FBI asked me to consult on their training materials, she said. Help them understand how someone like Derek can turn family love into a weapon. Are you comfortable with that? David asked. I think it's important. There are other organizations like Derek's still operating. If my story can help identify and stop them, then maybe something good can come from all this. Over the following months, our family slowly began to heal. Chloe attended therapy twice a week, completed her community service, and gradually rebuilt relationships with her old friends who'd been concerned about Derek from the beginning. David and I went to couples counseling to process our own trauma from the experience. We talked about trust, about how to recognize manipulation, about what we'd learned about ourselves and each other. I keep thinking about how close we came to losing everything, David said during one session. Not just our lives, but our family, our sense of safety in the world. But we didn't lose everything, I reminded him. We lost some things. Innocence, maybe, a certain kind of trust. But we also gained things. Strength, appreciation for each other, understanding about how much our family actually means to us. A year after Derek's arrest, Agent Chen contacted us with an update on the investigation. The Inheritance Club had been completely dismantled. 47 people were convicted in connection with the organization, and over 100 murders had been solved across 15 states. Your evidence was crucial, she told us. Those notebook photographs led us to witnesses and accomplices we never would have found otherwise. What about the families, the ones who lost people, finally getting closure, and in some cases, recovering assets that had been stolen? Derek's organization had been systematically looting their victims' estates for years. 2 years after the basement incident, Chloe graduated from her psychological rehabilitation program with honors. The judge officially terminated her probation, and she was legally free to rebuild her life however she chose. She chose to stay close to home. I spent so much time running from family, thinking independence meant rejecting everyone who cared about me, she explained over dinner at our house. I don't want to make that mistake again. David reached across the table and took her hand. You'll always be our daughter. No matter what happened, no matter what choices you made, that never changed. I know that now. I just wish I'd known it before. That night, as David and I cleaned up after dinner, I reflected on everything we'd been through. The terror, the betrayal, the slow process of forgiveness and healing. Do you ever regret not having Derek killed instead of arrested? David asked suddenly. I considered the question seriously. Sometimes, when I think about the families he destroyed, about how close he came to destroying ours, but then I remember that killing him wouldn't have stopped the organization. It wouldn't have saved those other potential victims. It wouldn't have given Chloe the chance to come back to us. So justice was more important than revenge? Justice gave us back our daughter. Revenge would have just made us killers too. 3 years later, I published a book about our experience. The Basement, How One Family Survived a Murder Plot, became a bestseller and helped law enforcement agencies nationwide recognize the signs of inheritance-based murder conspiracies. Chloe wrote the epilogue. My mother saved my life twice, she wrote. Once by discovering the truth about Derek's plan, and once by choosing forgiveness over revenge. She gave me the chance to become the person I was meant to be, instead of the killer Derek tried to turn me into. Not every family gets that second chance. I'm grateful every day that mine did. Derek died in federal prison 18 months later, stabbed by another inmate who'd lost his own family to a similar inheritance murder scheme. I felt no satisfaction in his death, only relief that he could never hurt another family. Miranda Torres left the FBI and now works as a consultant, helping families recognize the signs of financial manipulation and inheritance fraud. She sends us a Christmas card every year, thanking us for our inadvertent assistance in bringing down the most sophisticated murder network in modern American history. And Chloe? Chloe is engaged to a social worker she met through her nonprofit work, someone who knew her whole story before he fell in love with her, who understands both her capacity for being manipulated and her strength strength in fighting back from it. Their wedding is next month. David will walk her down the aisle, and I'll probably cry through the entire ceremony. But they'll be tears of joy this time. Tears for a family that refused to let evil destroy what we'd built together. Tears for a daughter who found her way back from the darkness. Some stories end with revenge. Some end with justice. Ours ended with love. Because sometimes love really is stronger than betrayal. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do to defeat evil is to refuse to let it turn you into something you're not. Derek wanted to destroy our family. Instead, he taught us how precious that family really was. And in the end, that made us stronger than any manipulation could ever make us weak. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.